and share some simple, actionable information. I will be your host today, and thank you to our sponsor for this session, Vancouver Island University. My name is George Hansen, and I'm president of the Vancouver Island Economic Alliance. And VIEA's mission is to be a driving force for a vibrant and diverse island and Gulf Island economy. And two of our primary objectives are to unite and connect decision makers, which we're hoping to do through this series, and to inform and add to the conversation on economic vitality. Our reason for hosting this series is to bring people together during this universally difficult time and to share useful information in bite-sized pieces. We're all hearing major announcements from government and other sources, and I know I'm receiving emails that are pages and pages long with lots and lots of information in it. And we're thinking that in this series, by providing some bite-sized, focused, single topic information, we can help folks be able to take some actions and figure out next steps in what they will do with their business and economic interests. So before I introduce our speaker today, I'd like to go over a few details. One is you're all on mute, and we would appreciate if you remain muted, so we don't have a cacophony of voices. There are 27 of us on the line presently, and that could get quite confusing quickly. Secondly, please forgive us in advance for any fumbling with technology. Jennifer Huffnagel of Innovation Island has done a great job of coaching our team in the intricacies of Zoom, but some of us are pretty new at it. We might fumble along a little bit, so bear with us, please. With lots of online traffic, because everybody's in isolation, we might experience some hiccups or a freeze frame or something. Just be patient with that. So far, our experience has been good, but you never know. And thirdly, following the presentation, which will be about 10 minutes long, we will invite Q&A using the chat box that you'll find at the bottom of your screen. And questions will come to me, be curated and posed verbally to our speaker. So what I would like to do at this moment is introduce our speaker today. Dan Hurley is an expert in communications and is the lead consultant with the Hurley Martin Group that hails from Gabriel Island. So without further ado, Dan.
Hello, everyone, and good day. I want to begin by acknowledging the territories upon which we are living and working. Those of you who are joining us from the traditional territories of the Coast Salish, the Nuchalot, and the Kwakiwak peoples, for whom we are pleased and honored to be living and working. Today, I'm joining you from the Nanaimo territory on Gabriel Island. And we appreciate you joining us here today in these extraordinary times. Our goal, as George mentioned, in hosting these events is really to bring us together in common cause during this unprecedented period, to support each other now and in the days and weeks ahead, and to work collectively to prepare for the next step. And that next step begins today and will begin in the weeks and months to come. So I want to just give you a little background on who I am, knowing that we have limited time. But as George mentioned, I am principal of a small consulting firm that's focused on public relations, change management, and stakeholder engagement, based here on Gabriel Island, but also serving our region. I've spent the majority of my career working in the field of communications, public relations, stakeholder engagement, philanthropy, etc. With the last 15 years working in post-secondary education, and 5 of those years working at Vancouver Island University. I'm also an active member of the Canadian Public Relations Society, and I hold an accreditation in both public relations and certificate in change management. all of those skills at this time are very much needed, and I'm hoping I can share a little bit of insight in the short time that we have together. And I'm looking forward to some of the questions and feedback that we will get into shortly. But let me start by defining what a crisis is. In a theoretical context, crisis is defined as a situation where an organization or a business's normal control measures have passed beyond a reasonable point of stability because of a catalyst that puts it in past the tipping point for effective management and altering the way an organization does business. Another way to define it is a significant threat to operations that can have negative consequences if not handled properly. So I think it's safe to say that we are now in that situation, not only for our own organizations, but for our society as a whole. Crises at the very essence are emotional events because they are outside of the norm. They are outside of what we come to expect out of our normal day-to-day lives and operations. So people are feeling very emotional, both within organization and outside organizations. And so the way that we respond and react to them must be done with this in mind. We must do it in a way that we want to measure the behavior that we are hoping from our employees, from our customers, our clients, our community members, and our fellow citizens. So the way to do it is to do it in a calm, professional, supportive, responsive, and kind manner. Crises are also the ultimate in change management. So when we're going through disruptive change, whether it's in our own lives, whether it's with our organizations or within our communities, people need to hear from their leaders on what it means for their organization, what it means for their community, what it means for their business. And in the case of this particular pandemic crisis, it's affecting the change of our whole society and our way of life. So that is why we're getting used to hearing from the Prime Minister at 11:15 or 11:30 every day. And we've come to expect calming but very direct information from our Public Health Officer, Dr. Bonnie Henry, from our Minister of Health, Adrian Dix, when required from the Premier, and other leaders within government. The information they provide and the manner in which they provide it is critical to ensure we manage our own anxieties and those around us, as well as to inspire them to act in a way that will help us get through and past this crisis. When it comes to change, though, and how it impacts individuals, whether it's ourselves, whether it's the people we lead or that we work with, people need to hear from you, from leaders that are influencers in their life. This is where you come in. Your voice and your leadership now and in the days and weeks to come are absolutely critical to successfully moving past this particular period of time. And so knowing who your audience is at the heart of effective communication strategy. Knowing who you work with, who your customers are, who your constituents are, is absolutely critical. And the more you can segment that off and knowing your individual audiences will help to guide how and in what manner you communicate with them. And it will differ depending on every organization and every community. Effective organizations are thinking about their reputations and their brands all the time. And if you're a business person or if you're involved with an organization, you already know that. But every organization should be thinking about the various issues that are going to potentially impact them over time. And that's the ability to anticipate and prepare for a range of potential issues or disruptions that could evolve into a crisis. And then developing the messages and the means to manage their way through it. I can safely say that few of us would have anticipated a crisis of this magnitude, even a few months or even weeks ago. But here we are. So we need to adapt, not only for what we're facing today, but what we're going to have to plan for in the coming weeks. And especially as we prepare for that next step, which is the recovery period. So many larger organizations, and some of you may be involved with those organizations who've joined us today, have a process by which they activate an emergency operations center or an EOC or something similar to that. And EOCs generally involve all the key decision makers within an organization. So it could involve the head of finance, human resources. If you're in an educational context, it'll involve education or academic leaders. And it will involve communications teams, the people who are responsible and charged with getting those messages out, but also relaying feedback and information back into the decision makers. In doing so, you want to engage all the right stakeholders. Some of you are either one or two person businesses or part of smaller organizations, so you may not have an EOC in name per se, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't have something that resembles that. And the way you can do that is you can involve board members, you can involve your own employees, even if they are frontline employees. There's no reason why, and in fact, encouraged to engage them during this period. The more you involve those individuals now, the better off you will be in the long run. Obviously, the most important thing in communications is to be clear, to be consistent, and regular in your communications with stakeholders, and that's absolutely critical now. As I mentioned, when it comes to communications outwards, especially the larger your organization is, you have to think both for your external audiences, but also your internal audiences. So organizations who have successfully managed through crises know that they need to be sharing information regularly with all stakeholders, including their own employees, so that no one is felt left out and no one has undue cause for anxiety or concern because they're not receiving that information. So right now, some of the things you should be and can be thinking about is, how are you sharing pertinent information that's coming from, for instance, government and health authorities? If there's anything that any of those government leaders or health leaders would appreciate right now, it is for your organization or your business to be relaying and emphasize. Oh, did I just disappear there? Are we good? Can you see me?
Yes, you're back.
Okay, thank you. So as I was saying, the thing that I think governments and health authorities would appreciate right now is, with your organization, since you are an influencer in your own way, is to help relay the strong communication messages that they're sending out right now, for instance, and primarily around social and physical distancing. The message about staying home, staying out of public places, only going out when you need to. As I said at the beginning, in change management, people want to hear from people they trust the most. And so if you can relay that in a way that appeals to your audiences now, that's absolutely critical. I think another thing that's really critical right now is people want to hear, how are they going to get through this? How are they going to be able to pay the bills? So being able to relay information around financial assistance that's coming out, and a lot of announcements are coming out very quickly. Again, the way that you can tailor those things to your own audiences are absolutely critical. You want to continue to do regular business if you can, but you need to do it in a way that is sensitive to your audiences, to do it in a way that doesn't look like it's taking advantage of the current crisis and yet not being tone deaf to those concerns. There are a lot of companies out there right now who are stepping up. So I think of, in particular, grocery stores and pharmacies and all those people who are continuing to maintain business. And in small communities like mine, those are absolutely critical, and we salute them and we appreciate what they're doing. But you're seeing some really creative things from small entrepreneurs, food providers who are changing their menus to the takeout and being as flexible and approachable as possible. Those organizations are the ones who ultimately are going to help us succeed in the long run. We also look at organizations like Shelter Point and Wayward Distilleries, who are stepping up. And even before the call from the federal government for support for hand sanitizers, they were already turning their operations towards those things. And helping to celebrate and communicate those things are key. I know we're short on time, but a couple of things you may want to consider. We're doing this right now. The more you can use things like video, Zoom, Facebook Live, being able to connect your customers or your partners together right now collective action. Just even an opportunity to have a weekly coffee chat is really key. But using those opportunities to come up with ideas on how to support one another is really critical. Some people, but in terms of creating new things, you may want to consider how those things are going to be used in the future. So if you're going to start something new, consider how that's going to be modeled going forward. The key thing here right now is, while we're thinking about the day-to-day changes to our society and to our businesses, we need to be thinking about the recovery period. And the more we can be thinking about how we want to model things going forward in the weeks and months ahead, the more we are going to succeed collectively together. So some final thoughts before we open it up for conversation. Number one, take care of yourself. If you are not healthy and you're not able to function properly, then others won't be able to look to you for support. So make sure you are heeding the advice of health authorities, you're staying home if you can, and you are sharing that information with your employees and your stakeholders. You need to find a way to continue to communicate constantly. Whatever those channels you're using now, continue to push out information, even if it's just for supportive messages, that's key. But as I said before, the more you can help to relay the information that's being shared by government and health authorities now, the better. Make sure when you check in with people, you're checking in on a personal level. It's hard to switch out of our regular daily life in terms of trying to get things done, but checking in on people to see how are your kids doing, is if there's somebody that's affected by this illness, you're checking in and making sure that people are looking after themselves. And the importance of being flexible and nimble and even innovative during this time is going to help us get through this next period, and indeed will help us to prosper as we go forward. So finally, the key advice that I have for people is to lead with your heart. As I mentioned off the top, this is an emotional time. You need to respond in kind. So live up to your values, whether it's your own values, whether it's your organization values. Show compassion, do what you say you represent, because people will remember that you were there for them during this period, and when we move past this current crisis and into the recovery period. So I'm going to end it there, and I look forward to your conversation, to the conversation and questions.
Thank you so much, Dan. And I'll redirect folks. You'll find a bar across the bottom of your screen. If you click on chat, that will open it up, and you can ask your question. Your questions will come directly to me, and I will forward them along to Dan. Here's a question for you, Dan. This is a black swan event. In many cases, typical actions and responses will not work as they once did. Could you please comment on that?
Absolutely. This is an unprecedented period of time for anyone. So in terms of people who've been through crises or managed significant issues before, there is no book written for this. We are writing the book as we go along. I would say that it is a time for really reflecting on what we've done before and determining what things are working and what are not. It should not stop us from trying new things. And but in doing so, we need to listen. We need to determine what is working and what is not working. We have to acknowledge when we've made mistakes, and we need to adjust. So I'll give you an example. So I'm continuing to provide some support to VIU at this time. Obviously, a large organization with 15,000 plus students, many of whom are international students. So there's a great deal of communication that's required in terms of being able to adjust how faculty are continuing to deliver programming to finish off the year, thinking about what the summer is going to look like, let alone the fall term. So there's a lot of very active work that's going on. But the key thing is, when we put out information, we are constantly looking for feedback. We're constantly looking at those emails, looking at those posts on social media, even hearing from our own staff, and being able to then say, okay, our next message needs to reflect the following, and we need to try something different. So last week, for example, we tried our first Facebook Live session with international students. We went live and gave them the information that we had, and then, like we're doing here, we sort of addressed their questions in real time, and then went back and adjusted our techniques. So you're absolutely right. This is an unprecedented event, but it's also an opportunity for us to try things that not only will help us get through the next period of time, but also gives us an opportunity to say, how can I apply this in what I will do in the future?
So here's another one, Dan. We have a local food producer who has more capacity to produce non-perishable food items to get them out into the circuitry on the island. They're wondering how to approach retailers and grocers, et cetera, to make their production capacity be known so they can help provide food on the island without coming off as opportunistic.
Well, that's wonderful. I think by raising it here today, I think that's a good start. And I think George may have more specific advice in terms of how to make those connections with the food retailers. But I think it's a question of, okay, what are your current means of communications with producers? Are you, that would be my question, is do you regularly communicate with them? And then it's a question of if there's a way to get the message out. It could be through other means. It could be through social media. It could be through, again, an organization like VIEA that has a scope of the entire island region, the coastal region. It could be through your Chamber of Commerce, because those folks are there to help as well. So there's a variety of different techniques. It might be something that you yourself do, but it's a question of, is this the kind of activity that I'm going to continue to be able to manage through the next few weeks and months. But I think the fact that you do have that capacity, I don't think would be seen as opportunistic at all. I think it would be very much in need at this time.
Here's one for you. Island trustees have asked visitors to stay at home and avoid travel to Gabriola Island and other Salish Sea islands. Do you have advice for remote and rural organizations in coordinating messages both to local residents and to people in surrounding areas?
Yeah, I think it's a really important message to get out there now. I think if you can build some outreach with an organization like Islands Trust and with the tourism, for example, TAVI, the tourism organization for Vancouver Island, that the more we can collectively bring those voices together to say to people, folks, we really appreciate your interest, but this is not the time. But when the time comes, absolutely. This might be something we can collectively work on together. And again, some island-wide organizations or some of the regional organizations can help to relay that information. So it's very similar to what I described in terms of our responsibility to help echo what government is sharing with us. So too, organizations like ours and others can help to reflect that information outward. So whether it's reposting communication, so like the call from the Islands Trust, if you can repost that on your website or on your social media means, whatever you usually use, that would help. But I think there's an opportunity there for us for some collective action.
There are a number of questions that lead down towards overload and when is too much too much. Here's one. I'm being very, very open with my team about the impact on our business and hence their jobs and income, and lots of discussion before we decide on actions. What is the balance between involving, sharing, and not adding to people's stress unnecessarily? Yeah,
no, it's a very real thing, and I mean, I find myself. I myself am usually a news and politics junkie, so I'm usually watching this stuff. And I've really limited the amount of information that I take in because it can be overwhelming and just cause additional anxiety. So I think you have to. It is a careful balance. It's again knowing who your team is and your audience, but at the same time, at this point, I don't think there's a point where you shouldn't be sharing information that affects people's livelihoods and their way of life. And I think the more you can involve them in really, my advice to you would be to say, what do we want tomorrow to look like? What do we want next month and next year to look like? And the more you can engage people in saying, help design what our recovery is going to look like, and I think it tends to inspire people to say, if you're future focused with being realistic, grounded in reality, is the right place to be.
Right. Now, here's a question coming from government. What messages do you observe are penetrating, and what messages do we need to communicate better and in a way that they are received?
So this is just me speaking. I'm sure there's 80 plus different opinions on the call at this point. But I think personally, I think what's been quite effective is the regular daily messaging we're hearing from the public health officer, in the way that she's communicating that message out, I find to be effective. I think what needs to happen is perhaps providing some resources to individual organizations and businesses to be able to say, what can you do to help get the message out about social distancing? Obviously, putting limits on how people can assemble and how people can operate their businesses is obviously a top-down, but a necessary requirement of that. But I think, as I said before, if there's ways that you can say, here's how you can help individuals communicate the message to their influence group. And I think that's the part where I would give strong advice to keep thinking that way, to say, what are the tools that individual people can do to help get that message out?
Here's one. For the time being, the Minister of Agriculture has deemed farmers' markets as essential service, yet the public backlash we've been receiving on social media has been counterproductive to the safe food chain supply that we're trying to maintain. What messaging should I focus on?
I would still, that's a good question. And have to think about that a little bit further, but I would say continue to put that message out there that you're there to serve the community. You're there to provide quality food to help support the food chain. We're also here to help support the messaging that our government and health authorities are putting in place. We were doing everything possible to ensure we have an effective and continuous food chain, and we ask that you respect that, while also we will continue to work to ensure that we deliver this product to all of you. I'd have to look at a little bit more in terms of what kind of feedback you're getting, but I also think those are important messages that you yourself need to reflect to our decision makers. That's a message that for instance, our MLAs need to hear, that they can reflect back to ministers, that they can reflect to the public servants who are responsible for this work. So I think using that as a feedback loop to those decision makers, I think is normally what I would recommend, but in these times, it's particularly important.
One more question. We're getting close to our end of our time here, Dan. What is the best way for us to communicate out to all staff, including those who are laid off? Email, weekly video conferencing? Like how do we communicate with people?
I think both of those are effective ways to do it. I think, and that's a really great point, an important point right now. There is a constituency of people who are unfortunately going to grow, and that is those who are laid off or where funding's not available to continue to keep people employed. If there's a means by which you can communicate with them effectively, then employ all of those methods. So yes, email is key, but it should be complemented with other techniques for which, again, people feel comfortable with. Video is a very effective way to get across, because you're getting those same messages across, but in a way that triggers a different part of the brain. And it's an emotional period of time. So people need to see, not only hear or absorb the message, but they need to see their leaders. And it doesn't always have to be the owner of the company or the president. It can be a frontline employee. It can be a student. It can be someone you're working with who can help to relay that information. So I would say it's all of those means, but obviously in a way that you can manage, because all of you are managing so much right now. But multiple means of communication. Again, go back to your audience. Who are your audiences, and what's the best way to communicate with them? You need to employ all those now.
Dan, thank you so much for your time. This has been, your information you provided is terrific.
Thank you.
The questions are still coming in. We have a maximum limit of the number of people that can participate on these calls as 100, and we are at 100 people participating on this call. Questions have come up from some of those that are asking questions about what our intention is moving forward. And please know that we intend to continue this series, perhaps as many as 2 or 3 video sessions per week and into the unknown future. And any ideas that any of you that are listening today have about content that would be important for you or your constituents or your customers or whoever it is you're working with, please send those cards and letters to me directly, and we will continue to work to put together very focused, bite-sized pieces of information to help people take whatever the next steps are in this process. If you're receiving VIEA's e-news, you will automatically be alerted to the next session. We're deliberately not creating a schedule because we want this to be as flexible as possible, and we also don't know the availability of people that might make presentations. So what we're going to do is find out who's available to make what presentations, and then find out when they are available, and these will be broadcast when the speaker is available. It might be at midnight, it might be at 7 in the morning, it might be at 11:30 in the morning, we don't know. If you don't receive our newsletter, you can go to viea.ca, scroll to the bottom of the homepage, and you can sign up to receive the newsletter, and then you will automatically receive these announcements. Also, people have been asking if these are being recorded. Yes, the sessions are being recorded and will be available in the news and media section of viea.ca. So you can re-listen to this, you can direct other people to that. There'll be more information on our website as well. So we will be putting out an announcement. We're expecting to have another session this Friday. And so watch for the announcement on that. And Dan, again, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.